When you order wild mushroom risotto at an upscale restaurant, you're probably not thinking about the regulatory gaps and supply chain vulnerabilities that might mean you're gambling with your safety. Professional wild mushroom foraging for commercial sale operates in a surprisingly unregulated space, considering the potential for deadly mistakes. The pathway from forest to restaurant plate involves multiple actors: independent foragers, distributors, and restaurant purchasers, with shockingly limited verification of species identification at any step. The commercial foraging supply chain typically begins with individual foragers who collect wild mushrooms and sell them to distributors or directly to restaurants. In many jurisdictions, these foragers face no licensing requirements, no mandatory training, and no certification testing to verify their identification skills. Someone can decide to become a commercial mushroom forager, start selling wild mushrooms, and operate entirely legally despite having minimal mycological knowledge. The economic incentives favor volume and speed rather than careful identification. Foragers are paid by weight, creating pressure to collect quickly and maximize harvest rather than spending time on careful species verification. Documented restaurant poisoning outbreaks from commercially supplied wild mushrooms reveal the consequences of this regulatory vacuum. Contaminated morel mushrooms have caused outbreaks affecting dozens of diners across multiple restaurants that purchased from the same distributor. Misidentified Amanita species have been sold as edible mushrooms, resulting in severe poisonings and at least one documented death. And toxic species have been mixed into shipments of safe mushrooms, either through careless harvesting or intentional adulteration to increase product weight and value. Each outbreak represents a cascade of failures across the supply chain. Regulatory inadequacy varies by jurisdiction, but remains problematic nearly everywhere. Many states and countries lack specific regulations for commercial wild mushroom foraging and sales. Where regulations exist, they often focus on general food safety rather than mushroom-specific expertise requirements. Restaurant health inspections verify temperature controls and cleanliness, but inspectors lack training to visually verify mushroom species identity. The result is a system where legal compliance doesn't ensure safety, and contaminated products can flow through commercial channels until people get sick. Restaurant liability presents another concerning gap. When restaurants purchase wild mushrooms from suppliers, they typically trust the supplier's species identification without independent verification. Few restaurants employ staff with mycological expertise to confirm that the porcini or chanterelles they received are actually those species rather than dangerous lookalikes. If customers are poisoned, legal liability questions become complex. Is the forager responsible, the distributor, or the restaurant? This ambiguity can mean victims struggle to obtain compensation while responsible parties dispute fault. Consumer risk assessment provides some guidance for people who enjoy wild mushrooms in restaurants but want to minimize danger. Questions to ask include: where do your wild mushrooms come from, and how do you verify species identification? Does your supplier have mycological certification? Do you purchase from licensed commercial foragers in jurisdictions that require licensing? Restaurants that can't answer these questions confidently are taking risks with customer safety. Understanding that locally foraged sounds appealing, but doesn't inherently mean professionally identified, helps calibrate expectations. Industry best practices from regions with strong regulations demonstrate what effective oversight looks like. Some European countries require commercial foragers to pass rigorous certification examinations demonstrating species identification expertise before they can legally sell wild mushrooms. Restaurants bear liability for verification, creating incentives to purchase only from certified suppliers. Traceability systems allow outbreak investigations to track contaminated mushrooms back through the distribution chain to specific foragers and harvest locations. These regulations haven't eliminated commercial wild mushroom poisonings entirely, but they've reduced frequency and severity compared to unregulated markets. The fundamental tension is between preserving access to legitimate wild mushroom commerce, which provides economic opportunities for foragers and culinary experiences for consumers, and protecting public health from the risks of misidentified toxic species entering the food supply. Finding the right regulatory balance requires acknowledging that completely unregulated commercial foraging creates unacceptable risks, while overly restrictive regulations might eliminate wild mushroom availability entirely. The solution probably lies in mandatory certification for commercial foragers, clear liability chains, and traceability requirements that allow contaminated products to be quickly identified and removed from distribution.